Welcome to this Atomic Talk. It's on the book Getting to Yes by Fisher, Ury, and Patton. Now, I'm pretty excited about this one. I read this book very early on, just when I started Missing Link, maybe in the first 5 or so years. And for many, many years, this book was the prevailing logic for, if you wanted to negotiate with somebody. And then, of course, out came Chris Foster's book, Never Split the Difference. And the two of them have quite opposing points of view. Now, spoiler alert. So I know that in Chris Foster's book, Never Split the Difference, he goes to war with the ideas of getting to yes. And I can totally understand his point, except for the fact that I'd used these principles successfully for nearly 2 decades before I read his book. I understand that his principles are very, very powerful as well, but there's something to be said for both. So I would suggest that you want to present both. I'd say maybe we're going to do a bit of a negotiation series, present one, have a couple of weeks, get some feedback, how did it work, what went on, and then present the other one. Now, because this is the older book, it may make sense to present this one first and then get into a debate about it. I think for me, the reason I quite like this one is about kind of getting to a yes place, whereas Chris Foss says that you shouldn't be in a place where you can actually split the difference. So these are quite opposing ideas. But of course, we're not negotiating for hostages. So we often can split the difference and, maybe often we should. So let's go into the delivery dare. Well, the delivery dare for this week's presentation is that I want you to get a little bit of interactive, and you're going to have to kick off with that interactivity at the very beginning of the presentation. So I want you to get out 2 pieces of paper. There could be little post-it notes or anything like that, 2 little pieces of paper. And on one of them, I want you to write, your opposition wants the zest. And then on the other one, you're going to write, your opposition or opponent wants the fruit. Okay, and then you're going to fold those up like this, and you're going to keep one in each pocket, and you're going to start. As we get into the presentation, you're going to get them to discuss it and to debate a little bit, and it's going to kind of get things going off at the beginning. And you can get other people involved. You can make them teams and, whatever you want to do to try and make this interactive. Once you do that, that will set everything off in the right place for the rest of the presentation. I think it's quite a fun one. I like the stories that are in it. I think it makes a lot of logical sense. It's easy to understand why this would matter, whereas Never Split the Difference has a little bit more complexity in the formats. So that's again why I like going with this one. That's it for me. Away you go. Over to the talk. Hey everybody. An orange. What is this? What is this orange? Why do I have a picture of an orange on the screen? Can you tell me? What does that orange mean to you? What is that? How does the orange make you feel? Okay. Hold on a second. I've got a better idea. What we're going to do is get a bit of a debate going. I need 2 volunteers. You either volunteer or you'll be voluntold. Anybody? Right. Sue, thank you so much. Cool. Anybody else this side of the room? Give me somebody this side of the room. Mike, thank you. Okay, so we got Sue and we got Mike. All right, so the 2 of you both want the orange. Okay, there's something you want to do. You both want the orange. What I need you to do, stand up for me, please. Cool, awesome. What I need you to do is to negotiate. Are you ready? Are you ready? Let's get it on. Now, at this point, they'll be negotiating. So you cannot let them do it. Just, let them go about their business, see what they do, egg them on, encourage them. Cool. All right. Sue? Yep. Okay. That's a good point. Mike, how do you counter that? Fantastic. Okay. Hold on a second. Just pause for me a second. Right. Sue, just hang on to this piece of paper for me. Thank you so much. And Mike, will you hang on to this piece of paper for me? Cool. Don't unfold it yet. Cool. Carry on as you were. All right. Great. Okay. Good point. So what did you come up with at the end? What was your decision made? Okay. What's the easiest way to decide to negotiate for this orange? Where did you get to? Okay. You want to split the orange. All right. That makes sense. So you split the orange. The rest of you, do you think that's a reasonable compromise the 2 of them come up with? Happy? Cool. Anybody upset? No? You all good? Fantastic. All right, so well done, you 2. You can have a seat. You did well. Oh, in fact, before you sit down, do me a favor. Will you both of you just mind opening the piece of paper that I gave you? Sue, what does yours say? It says, your opponent wants the zest. And Mike, what does yours say? It says, your opponent wants the fruit. So it turns out that Sue wants to make a fruit salad, and Mike needs the zest because he wants to make this orange flan. Because, look at Mike. Mike's an orange flan kind of guy. So now, turns out that one of them wanted, one part of the orange and somebody wanted a different part of the orange. Last orange in the shop. is there negotiation? Do we still think it's as successful? No, obviously not. How could they have done it a little bit better? Any ideas on that? Right? Okay. Yeah, cool. Makes sense. So they could have taken it and Mike could have scraped off the zest and then Sue could have made a fruit salad. So this is what we tend to do when it comes to negotiation, right? We tend to get to a position where we think that, we just got to kind of meet halfway and go through it that way. And for me, that's never been the best way, and I think that all of us have been in some degree of negotiation. And you're in that negotiation when both of you walk away feeling a little bit frustrated. I don't know if you've ever heard the term that, in the negotiation, both of you should walk away feeling a little bit like, And that's always been the wisdom when it comes to this thing. And it's one of the issues that was addressed in a fascinating book that I read called Getting to Yes, Negotiating Agreement Without Giving In. Because to some degree, cutting the orange in half was, of course, giving in. And the authors, Fisher, Ury, and Pollock, they kind of have this core idea and hypothesis. And they say, negotiation is a lot like trench warfare. You're in there and you're all just fighting for, space. The Germans would go one way and then, the British would go the other way. And that's kind of how the trench warfare went way back when in World War I. It was all just about gaining space. So it was kind of like the argument with the orange that we just wanted to, get more of than our fair share. And they believe that there's a better way of doing this. They believe that there's a better way of tackling negotiation as a whole. And I want to explain it to you today. And their idea is based on 3 very, very simple principles. So let's go through those. Principle number 1 is you need to focus on interest, not position. So what are they interested in? Not where do they feel that they have to be. I have to have the orange. Well, no, I'm interested in baking orange flans or making fruit salads. Okay. Number 2 is, can we think win-win? Can we invent options for mutual gain? In this case, of course, we know exactly what that option for mutual gain was. And number 3, principle number 3 is one of my favorites. And once you understand it, it'll blow your mind. And that is this. Can you develop your BATNA? Does anybody know what a BATNA is? Anybody have any ideas what a BATNA is? No? Okay, well, I'll tell you. A BATNA is, I'm kidding. I'm going to come to that in a second. All right, so I want to explain to you one of the stories in the book that I really, really liked. I thought it was quite fascinating. So somewhere in Southeast Asia, a battle was going, right? So these two groups of revolutionaries and this government had been at battle for like quarter of a century, 25 years. They've been fighting. And the revolutionaries had like this rallying symbol that was basically, either, freedom or death, independence or death. And of course, the government was like, fine, no problem. You may have it. Death, not independence. And this went on for, like I said, quarter of a century, 25 years, and they weren't making any headway. That trench warfare was just kind of stuck in the middle. And so eventually they called over one of the co-authors of the book, William Ury, and they had invited him to Switzerland, and they brought in the kind of leader of the revolutionaries, because at the time they wouldn't want to be in the same room together. And he said, will you speak to this person? The guy was like, okay, cool. So he brought him in and turned around and said to him, okay, cool. So William Ury sat him down and said, listen, tell me, what's your position? Like, what's your position? What matters to you? And he was like, my position. My position is independence. So Ury was thinking about this and thinking, well, I get it, but I don't know if we can make that happen. I don't know how we can do that. So instead of that, could I maybe ask you, what is your interest? Or what is your interests? And the revolutionary looked at that and thought, what do you mean? And he's like, well, why do you want independence? And the revolutionary was, I don't know. I want independence because I want independence. And he's like, no, but why do you want independence? Like, what's going on here? And you can imagine, if you've been fighting for independence or death for 25 years, you kind of don't stop to think about it. What you want is independence. That is your position. But actually, I don't know if I can help you with that. Like, let's say that maybe I don't have the power as an outside consultant from the US to help you with that. But let me just understand why independence is important for you. Like, what does a lack of independence mean to you? And the guy was like, well, okay, that makes some degree of sense to me. So let me try and explain it to you. So We want, control over our resources. We want control over the legislature. We want to be able to, make a case for what it is we do. We want to have control over our culture. We want to be able to practice our own language. We want our own education. And we want recognition. We want a seat at the UN. We want to be able to, say what it is we want to say and feel like we're making an impact. And what Uri realized quite quickly was, well, they may not get their position, but they could advance their interest. We could get them closer. And that's what he set out to do. He set out to negotiate a peace based on the interests that the group wanted, rather than the position that they felt they needed to happen. And that's how they got there. The line that kind of sums this up in the book that I thought was quite wonderful was this. He said, the more attention that is paid to positions, the less attention is devoted to meeting the underlying concerns of the parties. And that's the problem. So we've got to make sure that we meet the underlying concerns of the parties. And in this case, the underlying concerns were that they wanted to have their cultural, freedoms and things like that and be taken seriously and have a seat at the big table. And when they were able to negotiate in part for that, they were able to stop the battle. This brings me to position number 2, and that is to think win-win. How can we invent options for mutual gain? How can we find a position in which both people feel like they're walking away winning? Now, the story they told about this in the book, I really, really enjoyed it because it's one that's maybe more near and dear to my heart. I've never had to negotiate for peace in a small nation in South Asia, but I have had to sell a house. And selling a house feels quite tricky. Any of you ever had to buy or sell a house? Right? Well, you know what it's like because you want to sell a house, or even if you want to buy somebody's house, you're going to be dealing with who? Right, estate agents. And every single person who came to this guy's house, they was like, well, hi there, I'd like to help you sell your house. And this guy was in a little bit of a rush to sell the house because a power plant had been kind of commissioned to go up near it. And he was worried about the property values and things like that. And so I thought, okay, cool. I really do want to sell this house. And so the agents would come by and say, okay, cool, no problem. We'd love to sell your house for you. Can you give me a sole mandate? And the guy said, no. I refuse. I do not want to give an agent a sole mandate as I don't trust agents. And the guy was like, well, what do you mean? He said, well, I don't want to give you a sole mandate. And the agent went away. And another agent came, hi, we'd like a sole mandate. Same story. I don't want to give you a sole mandate because I don't trust agents. Where the agent went, another agent came, said, I don't want to give you it. And you heard the movie over and over and over again. They all came up, they present this document, 6 months sole mandate. Every single time the guy was like, no, I'm not going to do this. And eventually the one guy sat down and said to him, hold on a second. So you're saying you don't want to give agents a sole mandate because you don't trust agents. So it's not so much the issue that you have with mandates so much as the issue you have with trust. And the guy was like, well, yes. He said, well, let me go away and see if I can do anything. And he came back and he said, how about this? How about we don't sign a 6-month mandate? How about we sign a 3-month mandate, but you can walk away after month 1 if I don't perform? What do you think about that? What do you think he thought? Anyone? Do you think they signed the mandate? Of course they did. And the guy sold it within a month because the estate agent knew they'd probably be able to sell a good house, like had a good offer, a good deal. He knew he'd probably be able to sell it for a month. The one team felt that, we have to have 6-month mandates. Another guy was like, I don't trust agents. And so they were stuck in this trench where they were just trying to gain space. Whereas this guy turned around and thought of another proposition that solved for, I do need a mandate of some sort in order to sell and, do the work that needs to be done. But you kind of need to make sure that you're not in too much of a contract that with somebody you don't trust. So how can I solve for that? And that's what they did. And the mindset they talk about in the book is this idea of being a third-sider. Can you get yourself to a place where you take on the point of view of the third person in a 2-person argument? How can you get onto, that position? And that's what I think we always have to try to do. And I want you to think about it for a second. Can you think of a time where, a third argument, a third-sider win-win concept came up in some negotiation we've done? It could be personal, could be in the business. Can anyone think of an example about that? An example where something like that's happened? Anyone? All right, Tom. Yes, I remember that well. Absolutely. And why do you think it worked? How do we get there? How do we get to that in that case? Right, sometimes we're just too close, right? It's hard to read the label from inside the bottle. You got to remove yourself from something and see it from somebody else's point of view. And again, that's about knowing what their interests are. So that's the big concept there, is if we can understand, first of all, what are their interests? Their interests were, I don't want to get, that guy's interest was, I don't want to be in a contract with somebody I don't trust. And, the win-win solution is, well, make that not feel like such a long-term contract. And, I still get my mandate. And that brings us to the third point. And the third point is to develop your BATNA. Now, here's where I'm going to tell you what a BATNA is. It's a beautiful concept. A BATNA is the best alternative to negotiated agreement. Okay, I'm going to say that again. A best alternative to negotiated agreement. So what does that mean? It means that if we don't come up with an agreement, okay, if we don't come up with an agreement today, we cannot do business. What are your best alternatives? Right? So that guy's best alternative is, in the previous argument, as well, I won't get the house and I'll go and have to sell for somebody else. And the other guy's best alternative is, well, I'm going to have to sit and wait again for somebody to sell this house, but I don't know if I ever will sell this house because no one's going to give me a mandate. So now we understand the kind of limits on both sides of things. And this is very powerful for two reasons. Reason number one, it lets you know who has the greatest source of strength. And this is pivotal. If you understand who has the biggest source of strength, who has the position of power, like it's worth for who if you walk away. And I'm going to give you an example of that in a second. The second is, it helps you to find your walk in the way, your walk away point, your line in the sand that you absolutely will not cross. If I know that I can get a service similar to yours, around the corner for a certain amount of money, well, then I know that I'm not going to pay you a cent more than that. So that is my line in the sand. Or it could simply be based on my budget. That's all I can afford. That's where we're at. So by knowing your BATNA, it's helpful because it also means one of the mistakes that people make in a negotiation is they give space that they actually don't have to give. So it's worthwhile knowing who is stronger here, what is my position, and where the end of my limits of negotiating power. Now I want you to think about some examples. I want you to imagine you're at the airport, your plane's about to take off in 45 minutes, you're feeling pretty hungry. So you go to this little cafe at the airport in the the little restaurant in the departure lounge, and you look at the price for the hamburger and it costs a fortune. And you're like, no man, come on, this is ridiculous. Now you could call them over and negotiate, but how well do you think that's going to go for you? Right. What is the BATNA? The BATNA for them is, of course, that they don't sell one hamburger, they sell one hamburger less. The BATNA for you is you have to get on a plane and fly hungry. So who has the negotiating power? Of course they do. And that's why they use it, right? There's no negotiation. Do you want the burger or not? Do you get it? They know their BATNA. On the flip side, you may decide, well, my upper limit for paying for a hamburger is this much. I'm not going to pay more than that. And then you walk away as well. Go buy a bag of crisps. Now, on the flip side, I want you to imagine negotiating for a used car. Well, this is tricky. So now who has the bargaining power there when you're negotiating for a used car? Well, now it's a tricky one because, of course, if I decide that this car here that I want is actually going to cost me more than I'm willing to pay, what is my best alternative? Of course, I'm going to go to the dealership down the road. I'm going to go find that, and they know that there are other options available. So it's a great tool. When you figure out your BATNA, you know exactly who's in the position of power, and it really, really helps you have that bargaining when you're doing things. I was once negotiating with a person that I was selling a house to, and the estate agent, had got a deal on the table, and this was after we'd negotiated everything, but the buyer wanted to drop down in price, and I'd already been pushed up in price. The estate agent was motivating for us to move to the middle, and I said to the estate agent, well, I'm willing to move. They're willing to move, but are you willing to move? I will sign this deal off right now if you drop a percentage in commission. And at first they were like, well, we agreed on the price. And I said, well, we also agreed on the selling price, but here we all are. Do you want to get this offer over the line today or not? And of course the estate agent does, because they don't want to sit in our house on another show day. They signed, everybody made a compromise in the way we were. Right? By knowing those limits, by knowing the boundaries, that makes you have all the power. And also it's worthwhile because, it is helpful because it'll allow you to go and look for objective criteria. How much is this car worth? What will happen if I don't sell this house today? So one of the great ways to look at this, if you're not sure who has the position of power, just ask yourself this question. How would a judge, decide this? What would they choose to do if they were passing judgment on you? Right? It's a nice little rallying, just a reminder of where your position of power is. So that's it for this one. I just want to remind you of those 3 principles. Principle number 1 is focus on interest, not position. Right? What do they really want? Principle number 2 is to think win-win, invent options for mutual gains. Can you be that third sider? And number 3 is to develop your BATNA, your best alternative to negotiated agreement. That's it. All right, everybody, I hope you found this valuable. Just the most important thing I want you to walk away with, your forward focus is 1, I want everyone to challenge to negotiate for something. I don't care if you're negotiating for where you go to the restaurant. I don't care if you're negotiating with your children. I don't care if you're negotiating with somebody selling your house, or I don't care if you're negotiating with a client. Your challenge is to negotiate. However, just try on their point of view. Try and invent win-win arguments and insist on using objective criteria, your BATNAs. That's it. There's a line I want to leave you with that kind of have in the book that I think is beautiful, and that is this. An open mind is not an empty one. So please remember that an open mind is not an empty one. Open your mind, open their mind, and negotiate well. Thanks, everybody, and good luck.